Hey everyone, bit of a follow-up video. Thanks to some of the feedback I got on the in-ground long-term cache sort of storage canister thing, the Dirtyman Safe, right? So, first things first, a lot of you were very concerned, rightfully, because many people are idiots about this. You were concerned about the whole call before you dig. We're warning people in the comments, asking me in the comments, hey, did you guys call before you dig? Don't want to hit a gas line or knock out the fiber or something like that. So rest assured, yes, we did that. It is, those who don't know, it is a free service. Call before you dig. It is also a really great bit of cover story, like a reason to be walking around properties and stuff if you're doing surveillance and reconnaissance on jobs. Yeah, the people who come out, they all kind of look the same. They all have the same excuse. They technically are supposed to be carrying badges and stuff, but you can read like comments and subreddits for these people. Like, no, I was never issued a badge. I was never issued a standard garment. So yes, the call before you dig team did come out. Many utilities came out and they marked, so we knew we were not going to hit any lines. However, one person's comments were not about that, and that's the rest of what I want to talk to you about. Indeed. It always blows me away when people in my life who are far more talented than me and have busier lives than me, if you can imagine that, and just doing more cool shit, when I find out they like fuck with my videos. So yeah, I got a call from a buddy of mine, and I work with him on jobs and stuff. He's a very high speed guy. I'm not gonna say if he's like retired SF or overseas spooky spy or anything. I won't be particular. He could be all of the above. Just imagine that I know Jason Bourne or something. And the equivalent of that person is who called me, right? Like, so my buddy calls me up. He's like, hey, man, you want to talk about in-ground storage and caches and hidey holes? There's some extra details you can go for. And I was like, all right, this is not going to be a conversation about call before you dig. No, I mean, he's operated overseas. He's done a lot of work in hostile environments. Yeah, this is the caliber of person that I'm talking about here, and the guy who talked to me. And he told me I'm authorized to tell you some of this stuff. Yeah. So I took the notes of the stuff I can share and the stuff I can't share. And a lot of it honestly gets into OpSec, right? The sort of civilian version of this, where somebody's got some gold and other things that they are prepping for doomsday and they want to like not have it in their house because houses can, flood or burn down. That's fine. Like OpSec isn't really a thing. The fire doesn't know who you are or care. But if you are in fact operating in an environment where you might face ramifications if your cache is discovered or if it's tied to you or anything like that, that's the kind of crazy cool conversation he had with me, right? So for example, you don't put it on your own property if you're doing something high risk, right? That's one of the big things. You go out into public land in the woods, and there's a whole litany of discipline on how to map it out so that you can find it later without actually having like a treasure map. How do you tell somebody else where it is without giving them something that's illegal to know? It's a whole interesting thing. If you do any kind of geocaching, you kind of know how this can work, but imagine that super on steroids. You don't call before you dig, obviously, if you're on some sort of property because you don't want a record of that kind of thing. The other thing, speaking of digging, though, you're going down pretty deep. So, I mean, my auger job in the last video that you saw about this wasn't bad, right? But, my buddy pointed out, he's like, oh, 18 inches minimum. Like, you got to have at least 18 inches of earth. Otherwise, all kind of various metal detectors or even ground penetrating radar is going to start picking up on stuff. But the deeper you go, the better. So, you got to do that. But then you got to think of getting it out of there. If, that little 6-inch job that I did knocking some dirt off and yanking up a cord, he's like, that's fine, again, for low risk. But how are you going to get down to get your stuff? So they talk about things like, well, you could a foot below the earth put a little camping trowel, like the Sierra Club leave no trace, bury your poop in the wild kind of environmentalist trowel. Those are foldable and they're plastic usually. Yeah, that's what you do. You put that a little ways under the earth so that you can get to it and then dig the rest of the way to get to your canister. When you're disturbing all that earth, by the way, freshly turned earth is a giveaway. So we talked about things like dogs, that if they have, especially your scent, like they will run a dog around. A dog can be like, oh, this human was all this earth was handled by this human when he dug it up, put it back in. So you don't want to contaminate the dirt. You're wearing gloves, like long arm gloves. And also freshly turned earth, and you saw this in the video that I shot, right? When we kind of raked it back and raked it clean, like that earth is not what's supposed to be. That's not the O layer on the top. You're down into the different layers of soil. That dirt doesn't make sense there. So you want to make sure dirt's going back where it belongs. And he was like, yeah, what you do is you put a ground cloth down. If you're making a hole, that's, 6 inches, 8 inches wide. That's the hole in your ground cloth. And it's like ice fishing. All your operations happen through that hole, and the dirt is on the ground cloth. And it's so freaking cool. It's absolutely cool. As far as resilience goes, under the earth, moisture and all that stuff, remember I pulled up my canister and I redid it because I said, oh, I forgot to use the Teflon tape. I'm not a plumber. As many of you again in the comments were awesome. You gave me that. You're like, yeah, you got to use way more Teflon tape than that. But other people, my buddy and a few others as well included, they said, actually, Teflon tape isn't for sealing purposes. Do you know why you use Teflon's a lubricant. All these sort of PTFE and Teflon tapes, they are to help the threads engage smoothly, because to really lock in and seal any kind of fittings like that, you want to crank them down, usually not just by hand. You want to use a tool to crank them down so you're actually cutting the threads into each other and jamming with friction force. That's why you use the Teflon. In general, if you're undoing the canister, you probably shouldn't be able to undo it by hand if you meant to seal it well, which is also something we discovered. Emily and I, we had to like hold it steady and get the giant channel locks out to get it back open, even just the first time I buried it for a day or two. So I probably would have been fine, but we'll see. We'll see what it's like when we bring it up. But getting your canister open, that's another thing he talked about to me. My buddy was like, yeah, what happens if you get this thing out of the ground and now it's just jammed shut? Do you have tools in the ground that you can break it apart with? Speaking of break it apart, he's like, yeah, we also learned on certain assets, if you literally have like your backup passport and you've got 1,000 dinars and like something to get you to the airport to get to exfil from a country, you can't be dicking around in a field like, oh, I gotta go to the hardware store and bring my canister. They would cut score lines actually into the canister. So like you rip it out of the ground, you find a rock, you smash it on the rock, haul ass to the airport. Speaking of, one really good thing that you could put in these canisters, one of the dumbest, easiest things to forget. All that stuff that you saw that I buried, imagine it was super life essential and I had to get out of there, like there was a fire coming or something. What am I just going to carry it in my hands? Grab a cheap like JanSport backpack from eBay or something, crush it down, shove it in the canister for a couple of bucks so you can get everything out, put everything in the bag, you're wearing the bag, off you go. Thinking, always thinking. Will my stuff ultimately survive the way I have it stored? I don't know. I didn't use a lot of desiccant, and there was a lot of free space in that canister, even though we packed things kind of in there. Again, this is the kind of stuff that people learn in those classes. Air is corrosion. Air is moisture. You leave less free space. So things like bagging all of your stuff individually, this gets into anybody who's ever, again, taken special training or, I don't know, been in the IRA or something. You learn about if you want a long-term storage, certain gun parts, there's a whole process you have to strip all the oils, strip everything off of it, get all your hand oils, all those oils, because again, they're going to have different corrosion properties. You're going to use a very specific controlled oil. I'm going to talk to you about a very specific lubricant. It's not really an oil, it's kind of a heavy grease. I wouldn't recommend it for this possibly, but there's an aeronautical grease that I'll tell you about in a future video soon. But yeah, the actual process of super long-term storage of guns, like how many of you bought surplus guns and stuff like Cosmoline, and getting Cosmoline back out of it is a freaking process as well. We're using gas and you're soaking it in hot rags and ugh. Yeah, actually really storing your things for really long-term corrosion-resistant storage, that's a whole other animal. And what I would have done, the cheap and dirty way, what you saw with the video, I would have taken that tub of desiccant and I would have just filled up the canister with desiccant. Leave no space. That's a cheap way of doing it. But again, much more that you can do there. Much more to learn. And things like, again, he's like, hey, if you do bury it out on public land, how long is that land public? Are you checking the records to see maybe some horrible bill goes through Congress and public land isn't public land anymore? Maybe you put it on like the edge of town, but then there's going to be a development that goes in, or there's going to be demolition of the property and something new is going to be. And are you checking those records like on your home computer? Are you leaving a browser history and stuff? I'm not an influencer online telling you about VPNs and all the other privacy software they try to sell you, but all of this goes into this. Actually doing a cache in the ground operationally soundly is a very involved endeavor. If you really want to get into this and dig deep, I'm sure there's subreddits for it. I'm sure, again, there's a very special training that you may not have access to for it. But the prepper community sometimes puts their toe in the water and doesn't really think about this from all angles. If you want to think about this from all angles, this is a little primer for you, but there's a lot more to learn and a lot more to try and a lot more to read. Whatever you do, whether you're trying to hide your valuables from forest fires, floods, nosy neighbors, or actually you're trying to hide a fake passport and some fleeing money because you're overseas operating downrange where the government's going to kill you if you don't make it across the border to a friendly airport. Either way, think about what you're doing. Do things the way you've been trained if you've had training. Go get training if you think you need it. But ultimately, whatever you're up to, I hope you stay safe out there.